Greetings, teacher friends. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person to share the new upper level Key Links Fluency titles, but I hope this little video interview will actually share with you some of the features that we have in these books.
Jill, what is the fluency stage of reading and why should it be emphasised?
Well, the fluency stage of reading is when children can decode with ease, without any mental cognitive effort.
So should we still be emphasising guided reading at this stage, and what should we be focusing on if we are?
Absolutely, we need to be emphasising guided reading. It's very important at all stages of children's reading development. The things that we should be focusing on here, though, at the fluency level, is really getting children to dig deeper into the text, to truly understand what is it all about.
And in regards to the Key Links Fluency and Upper Fluency titles, what's unique about the Key Links titles?
Well, there are many things, but one of the things that are particularly unique is the emphasis on having students to read like a reader and read like a writer.
What do you mean by reading like a reader?
Well, reading like a reader is when they dig deep into how the author has written the text and what is it truly about, the vocabulary and the meaning behind the words.
And what about reading like a writer?
Reading like a writer is when the students look at how the writing has been written, and so they then focus on the techniques that the writer has used.
So what are some of the comprehension strategies that the Key Links Fluency books promote?
Oh, we have many comprehension strategies, and these are all set out in a scope and sequence that we have. And just to share some of those comprehension strategies, we have things like vocabulary. We have to make sure that students can clarify the vocabulary, but not only that, also the phrases that are used. Predicting and justifying the predictions. We can't expect children to predict and then not make them justify why they predicted that. Inferring is a very important comprehension strategy. Asking questions. I think what happens is that the teachers do a lot of question asking, but the students really need to be the ones who are also asking the questions. Making connections to themselves, to other texts, and to the world out there. Visualising is a very important comprehension strategy that is covered in these texts. Comparing and contrasting, author's purpose and point of view, skimming and scanning, retelling, the main idea, focusing on the main idea is a very important skill, and then finding evidence to support the thinking. And that's important, that students at this fluency stage go back to the text and find the evidence that supported their thinking about it.
Gosh, and what else does Key Links focus on?
Well, it focuses on the writing techniques that are in there, and just to emphasise some of the writing techniques that we have embedded in the text, but also in the panel, things like show, don't tell, building tension, strong verbs and specific nouns, appropriate adjectives. Too many times students use adjectives in the wrong places, and these books will show them the appropriate use of adjectives. Using imagery. How does a writer use imagery to paint a picture for a reader, like similes and metaphors and personification, those things. Adding detail to a text. How do you use the right tense? A variety of sentence structure. So the books show that simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, they're all very important parts of writing. What about a rich vocabulary? We have these embedded in these texts as well. And showing children that writing is about writing for an audience and a purpose, and those things are emphasised, as well as voice and as well as how to develop characters. And there's many more in the scope and sequence.
And word and letter, does Key Links Fluency have a focus on word and letter?
Yes, it also has a focus on word and letter, but that is a focus on word and letter in context, not explicitly taught, but in context. And that consists of things like word derivations, prefixes, abstract nouns, word meanings, those sort of things. And also visual language is part of what these books do emphasise as well. Visual language is very important. Things like diagrams and illustrations and tables of contents and graphs, they're all part of the Key Links upper level fluency.
Gosh, Jill, that's a tremendous list. how does Key Links ensure that teachers can cover all of these things?
Well, first of all, these things are embedded in the text, so that they have been written, specially written, to have all these techniques in there. The second part is that in order to make sure and ensure that teachers are covering these things, we have a teachers focused panel, which is key to all of our Key Links books. Actually, all our Key Links books have the teachers focused panel, but there's a lot in there to cover, and we have put it in every text, in every book. We are covering these skills.
So essentially, you've done all the preparation for teachers, and so they can just pick up the book and run with their group.
Absolutely.
Gosh, what a time saver!
Well, exactly, because there's no way. I don't think that any teacher, even a very, very good teacher, a very skilled teacher, could possibly be able to cover all these skills.
Yes, and we're also time poor these days. Can you demonstrate some of the skills that are embedded in these panels, perhaps?
Yeah, well, perhaps if I just use a narrative text. We know it's a narrative because we have the little key on the back to show that it is a narrative text. We can see the panel down the side. Now, there looks to be a lot in that panel. We don't expect teachers to take everything on that panel, but just to take out the things that are appropriate for them in that group. The panel shows a little symbol thing up here, which is called a preview and a view, and that is what the teacher would be following. And just to show you an example here, the first thing on this panel says, read the first paragraph and think about how the author has set the scene. And it's a really important thing that we show students, that they're reading for a purpose. And then the teacher's going to say, well, how has the author set the scene? How can you answer that? And then the next thing is, what did you think about first when you read this paragraph? Then the panel goes on to talk about comprehension strategies and the different comprehension strategies that students are using, and what did you use to figure out what had happened. And so we're looking now at the inference comprehension strategy. Then the panel instructs the students to read the rest of the book, and when they've read the rest of the book, something that's very important. That is, we have to clarify the vocabulary, like clarify phrases that were used, like etched in your memory. What does that mean? Or clarify the word fatal, or clarify another phrase, my world had tumbled. What does that mean? Blotted out. What does that mean? And cocoon. So it's all about clarifying, which is there on the panel. And then the last little question on that particular panel is to compare and contrast. And that's a comprehension strategy. Contrast how the other kids at school thought about what it might be like without a mother to how the writer felt about it. And this is about digging deeper. That's what it's all about. Reading like a reader. This is the reading like a reader part of the guided reading.
And the writing review, Jill, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the writing review is not something you do on the same day as reading like a reader. The writing review is reading like a writer. So we would do the reading like a reader part and then come back at another day to do reading like a writer. And in this particular book, Reading Like a Writer, we see that by the writing review down here. And it's talking about the different types of sentences that have been used in this page here. So in this page here, there has been a simple sentence used, a compound sentence used, and a complex sentence used. And that's showing the students, letting them find those sentences and finding out why they work and how they work and which ones we use the most, and why they were written that way.
Is that the only, the Fluency titles, there's just narratives or personal narratives?
No, definitely not. We need to expose children to a wide variety of different text forms, and the Key Links Fluency, upper level Fluency, like the other levels, does focus on a variety. We have a narrative that was a personal narrative. This one is a narrative text. It really has a theme of bullying, which I think is an important theme, and about selfishness, and about then in the end forgiveness. This one here is an informational explanation about a world without trees. So students have to imagine what it would be like with a world without trees, and it explains about that. This is a persuasive argument, and it's really set in the way like a blogger's babble. So it really shows a blog that's in here, and then it's the responding comments from people who have posted comments about the blog. So basically it's a persuasive argument. This one is an informational report really about the invisible threads between a dog and a human being. What are the invisible threads, the bonds that hold them together? And this one is an informational report about the hidden horrors. Really, hidden horrors is about landmines, and how can we find these landmines? And there's all the different ways that people have used to try and find the landmines.
Fantastic. Are there independent activities that go along with these books?
Yes, every one of these books has an independent activity in the back, and the independent activity in this one is the personal narrative that I talked about. First of all, the independent activity always focuses on oral language, so it's working with a partner, talking about, and one of the emphases in this book was the different types of sentences, short, long, complex, compound sentences. So it's about talking to a partner and finding the different types of sentences that are in that book, and working with them. Then working with the sentences, so take a small piece of the story and make note to show what the author has done with the sentence lengths and the structures and the beginnings to make it interesting for the reader. And then it is going away to find other personal narratives and the different types of sentences that are in there. So every one of the books has a different type of independent activity in the back of them.
And how long would you expect to use one of these books?
Well, that's a very good question, because each book varies. With a personal narrative and a narrative, the reading like a reader part would probably be done in one session, maybe of about 20 minutes. So it could be done in two. It depends on the teacher and what you want to get out of it. But then there's always, you need to come back to do the reading like a writer part. So that can't be done in the same day. However, some of these other books, like Blogger's Babble, that's an entire piece on its own, those 2 pages, the blog about a robot rising and the comments that are posted. That could be one reading like a reader session. And the next reading like a reader session could be the next pages. So that book could last maybe a week or so, because it's got little pieces finished in their entirety in each piece. So the important thing is to remember that guided reading at the upper level, fluency level, is not a long text. It's not, you can't do guided reading with a chapter book, because that does not give a variety of text forms. The idea is to expose students to a variety of different text forms in a shorter piece. That's what guided reading is here.
Fantastic, Jill. This looks like an incredible resource. Congratulations.
Thank you, and I think it is.